My name is Olivier Van Steenlandt. I'm a BI team lead working for X2O. X2O is a retail company located in Belgium, and at X2O, I'm mainly known as the person who makes the BI development planning and the person who optimizes the BI development and deployment processes. In my spare time, I'm a core member for DataMinds. DataMinds is the Belgian data user group focusing on the Microsoft data platform. Besides that, I do a bit about speaking and blogging as well, especially about data-related topics, data, SQL, and BI-related topics. As you can see, I have a blog myself right there, oliviervs.be, where I write about anything SQL, data, or BI-related topics. In case you have any questions about the topics that I'm touching today, you can contact me afterwards via email, via Twitter, via LinkedIn. Just reach out. I'm more than eager to assist where possible. Meaning every object we touched, every logic we changed, every configuration or parameter we added or adjusted was kept track of manually where, well, on a development ticket, in a Word file, in an Excel file. We tried email as well. Let's say that wasn't the best solution. It can get quite messy fast. Then, as a matter of tools, we were mainly using SQL Server Management Studio, which of course is a very convenient way of working. But at that point in time, we were having a couple of challenges as well. One of these challenges, for example, was moving big projects to production. What typically happened was, well, as soon as we received the go, well, we first need to find out which development tickets were involved, then which objects we changed, which logic we changed, which parameters, configuration, and so on. As soon as we knew all that, we could start to prepare our change scripts, migration scripts, and then we could start deployment. When we reached the deployment time, we were already losing half an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours, maybe a day, or maybe more, definitely for big projects. So it was really time consuming. Then after deployment, we were firing up test launches. And after these test launches, we could start bug fixing straight away. Why? Well, let's say we didn't document properly, so we were missing objects, missing configuration, and so on. So deployment already was a hassle. In an ideal situation, what you actually would like to do is, well, being able to prepare and deploy in, let's say, a matter of minutes, firing up test launches. As soon as your test launches are done, you want to go out with your team and start celebrating. In my case, it would definitely be with a decent glass of Belgian beer. Unfortunately, at that point in time, we weren't able to, since we need to execute a couple of big bug fixes first. The second example is priority changes. I've been struggling with this for at least 5 or 6 years when I just started to work. So let's take a look at this one from a business point of view. So let's say we're a beer manufacturing company, but a rather small one. And let's say we only have one production line, and the development team is making changes to the production line, and they're already making changes for the past 2 weeks. And right now they're really in the middle of all the changes they need to do. At that point in time, management runs into the office and explains, well, customer demand for draft beer is rising, so we need to get it right now. Unfortunately, at that point in time, the development team didn't have any solution to go, well, back to the beginning, and they still required 2 more weeks to finish the current changes. So the business was losing precious time and couldn't keep up with customer demand, which of course really is a shame. A third example is unwanted changes in production. A couple of years ago, in that small development team, we were allowed to take a look at quick wins in the morning. So let's say a quick win is development of less than 30-ish minutes. We were allowed to execute that kind of development in the morning, validating it by noon, and in the afternoon or evening, we were already deploying these changes to production. What typically happened was, well, during the deployments, and especially after firing our test launches afterwards, we were just finding out that we were pushing way too much into production. So instead of getting the changes for the draft beer in, we were already pushing our brand new beer to our production environment, which didn't pass validation yet, which actually just wasn't tested yet. So we were only delivering a mediocre product to our production environment, which of course is not really what we want. So we need to find a way around this, of course. The last use case is code went missing. So a couple of years ago, in that same small development team, we were required to use a certain, well, let's say, bug fixing strategy, which we call production first. Meaning, well, to minimize day-to-day business impact, we were required to execute bug fixes on production first. Of course, not really the thing you want to do, but we were required to just to make sure that business impact was maintained to a minimum. Of course, when making the changes or the bug fixes in our production environment, we were required to copy our code from our bug fix back to the development environment later on. And of course, that was what we were typically forgetting as well. So during next deployments, we were overriding our bug fixes. So instead of delivering our delicious beer with all the useful, with everything useful, we were actually delivering empty bottles of beer without the liquid gold inside. So without our already built knowledge inside, which of course is a shame. And in our case was really leading to unhappy coworkers as well. So there really is room for improvement. So if we need to summarize what goes wrong or what went wrong back then, well, first of all, as a development team, we were failing because of human mistake. Why? Well, we didn't document properly. We didn't prepare our deployments properly. We forgot to copy our code back to the development environment. Then, as a development team, we were failing on team communication as well. I know I didn't mention it explicitly, but if we were properly communicating within our own team of 3 to 5 persons, everybody could have been aware that the bug fix was made recently, and at least during a future deployment, executing a quick validation if the bug fix was available in the code from the development environment. But unfortunately, at that point in time, we weren't communicating properly. So then, of course, we were here for today, code management. If there was a proper code management system in place, we could have overcome a lot of these issues. So now it really is time to take a look at the future. So what are we going to do? First of all, I'm going to suggest to get a third environment in place, which we will call the acceptance environment for today. Where are we going to use this environment for? Well, first of all, to execute our deployment tests. And secondly, and to be fair, one of the most important ones for me personally, we actually want to be able to involve business in an earlier stage in our development process. Just making sure that business can validate changes before they move to production will give them some kind of feeling of ownership as well. So this might be pretty useful. Then, as a matter of process, we are going to introduce automatic change tracking. Well, automatic. Why? Well, we will require to use a certain set of tools. First of all, we're going to introduce Git. Git is a file-based comparison system. More on that later on. Then we're going to introduce Azure DevOps, where we are going to store all our code. And then our main tool for development will be Visual Studio. If you want to, you can use Azure Data Studio as well, which is perfectly fine. But for today, I'm only going to focus how to work with Visual Studio. Then, if you still want to use SQL Server Management Studio, you still can, but it would be more from a validation point of view, actually. Or if you want to, of course, you can still write your queries in Management Studio and then copying them over to your database project in Visual Studio. Can be done as well. Now, if we take a closer look at database projects. So first we need to know, what is database project? Well, a database project allows us to execute more project-oriented database development. If we take a look at the left-hand side of the screen right there, we can see a screenshot of Management Studio with the familiar folder structure, tables, views, store procedures, and so on. Then, if we take a look at the right-hand side of the screen right there, we can see an example database project, which actually has more or less the same folder structure. I can see tables, views, and so on. The key takeaway right here is the folder structure in your database project is your own responsibility. That's really important. So you can go wild, you can go crazy, you can do whatever you want. Just make sure that your folder structure in your database project is clear for your development team and for yourself as well. What is important to mention about database projects as well? Well, first of all, and this is really important, don't ever use database names in scripts. Never. I will tell you a story about this one. A couple of years ago, when I was working at a certain company, they really liked to have the environment name in the database name to make sure that they knew in which environment or to which environment they were connecting to. So database name underscore development, underscore acceptance, underscore pre-production, and you know what? Leave the suffix behind for a production environment. So if you're using hard-coded database names to refer to an external database, you won't be able to deploy from environment to another environment. If you ever need to refer to an external database, just know there is a way which is called SQL command variables. You don't need to remind the name for today, just know there is a way. Then there is something important to mention about indexes in database projects as well. There are two different things you can do. You can say, well, I want to keep all code together. And then you say, well, I just include my indexes in my database project as well. Or you say, I don't want to. Both options are fine. Just know, in case you keep your indexes in your database projects, this will increase your deployment time as well. Why? If you, for example, are making changes to a certain table which has a couple of indexes, that will first drop all indexes, recreate the table, and then recreate all indexes during deployment. So deployment time will be increased. Then, what is important to mention as well are publishing profiles. A publishing profile actually is an XML file where you can store deployment properties into, such as, for example, what do you want to deploy database properties? What do you want to do if there might be data loss? Might be an important one. And then the last example, what do you want to do with indexes? This might be important, especially when you choose to leave the indexes out of your database project. So I will show you this later on in the demo as well. Then we are going to introduce Azure DevOps as well. So for today, just know Azure DevOps mainly consists of 5 default services. For today, I'm only going to focus on Azure DevOps repos, where we're actually going to store or save our code into. In case you ever want to take a look at database deployment automation, it might be interesting to take a look at Azure DevOps pipelines. And if you don't have a development ticketing system yet, it might be interesting to take a look at Azure DevOps boards as well. Now, if we take a closer look into repos and for today, the Git way of working, then it is important to know that Git is a distributed version control system. Well, what does this mean? Well, actually, this just means that every developer is going to work on a local version of the code, on his or her local machine, of course. Then, if you're working with Git, you will hear a lot about branching as well. Branching actually is just making a copy of the existing code. That's a branch. Then, when you're working with Git, there are a couple of commands that you really need to know and understand. First command is pull to get all the changes from the remote to your local machine. And with changes, I really mean code-based changes. So if you changed a procedure to get that changed to your local machine, then you use the pull command. Then if you made a change locally and you want to get it to the remote, you're going to use a push command, or actually commit and push, first to get it onto your local repository and then pushing it to the remote, that your coworkers can continue working on your work when you, for example, are ill or absent. And then merge. Merge or merging actually is nothing more or nothing less than combining two branches back together as well. That's merging. Today, I'm going to introduce you to certain branching strategy. And this strategy is what I call branching per feature or feature branching. Some people call it trunk-based development, but what's in the name, of course. So the key takeaways here are, well, for feature branching, what we're going to do, well, we're going to create a repository in Azure DevOps. And when we're creating the repository, the first thing it will do, it will create a main branch, or probably called master branch. Actually, main branch or master branch actually are the same. What is important about the main branch is that it should always contain the production version of your code. Always. Really, no exceptions made here. Then, what we're going to doing today as well, we are going to create a development branch where we are going to store our development version of the code. And then for every single feature we would like to add to our code, we are going to create a feature branch right there. What is important about these feature branches, as you can see right here, we're always going to base them on our main branch. The reason why we're doing this is just because we want to keep flexible, since that was one of the things I was struggling with in the past. So then priorities may change. We can just, well, be really flexible if we're just using feature branching based on the main branch. We're going to execute development in our feature branch. As soon as our development is done, we're going to commit and push it to the remote. And then we are going to merge our change to the development branch. Then we're going to publish our development branch to our development environment, execute validation. And then there's one thing really important, which is, well, if you need to execute some changes to your feature, you will execute them on your feature branch. That's really important. And then, of course, after validation, we're going to push our change to our main branch and deploy it to production as well. Now, if we take a look at source control, we need to talk about challenges as well. So first challenge that you probably will run into are merge conflicts. And if you're as patient as I am, and you're using, for example, a third-party vendor tool to execute all your Git commands, then you will definitely run into merge conflicts on the SQL project file sooner than later, actually. So this one is important to know. If you're using Visual Studio, just make sure to hit that Save All button before you commit and push your changes to the remote. Then it needs to become a habit that, for example, when you're merging a change from your feature branch to your development branch, to, well, first of all, check out your development branch, pull in all changes for development branch, and only then execute your merge. If you don't, this might lead to more merge conflicts. So it just needs to become a habit. Then there is something to tell about branch maintenance as well. Let's say we are in the development team, we are creating 100 features a year. So we are creating 100 feature branches as well. Then, as soon as they're deployed to development, validated, and of course deployed to production in the end, we will need to remove the 100 feature branches as well if we're using the manual merge process. During the demo, I will show you how you can avoid this. So it's something really important. And then, to be fair, the biggest challenge of them all with source control is people. It really sounds funny, but people will be your biggest challenge. Everybody needs to be working in the same way, or source control won't work. It really is as easy as that. Cool. I have been talking a lot theoretically. So it is time to get into a more practical example. So what I am going to do is I'm going to open up, there we go, Visual Studio. So what did I do? Well, I've opened up Visual Studio and I created a brand new solution, which is called Cloud Data Driven. And in that solution, I actually created one empty database project, which is called AdventureWorks LT. In my first example, I won't be using this project, but I will just create a brand new project right here based on an existing database in SQL Server. To do so, well, I'm going to navigate to the left-hand side of my screen. There we go. Oh, I'm going to use this one. Might be more useful. There we go. So I've opened up the SQL Server Object Explorer right here, and I connected to my local instance of SQL 2019 on my laptop. And right there, we have the AdventureWorks Data Warehouse database, which we are going to use for our first example. In a second example, I will be showing something different with the AdventureWorks LT system. So let's get started. To get an existing database into a database project, we just can, well, connect using the SQL Server Object Explorer, then right-click on the database and say Create New Project. Yeah. So, first thing I will need to do is I will need to provide a name for my project. In my case, it will be AdventureWorks Data Warehouse, and then I need to specify where to save the project. So in my case, it will be presenting cloud data driven right there. And then there's something I want to point you out right here. So for today, I'm not going to bother too much about the import settings, which I just sprang through, but I want to point out this one, the folder structure. If you really like to work with the folder structure as in Management Studio, for example, then I would advise you to use the object type folder structure. It won't be completely the same, but this will be the most familiar to what you get in Management Studio. So for today, we will be choosing the object type folder structure, and then I'm just going to say start. What Visual Studio is now going to do is, well, it's first going to create a brand new project, and then it's going to compare which objects are missing and start to import these missing objects into the database project. In the meanwhile, I'm going to show you something else. This one, there we go. Before you can get started with database projects, you will need to find out if you have the right feature installed. So if we just navigate to Tools, Get Tools and Features, the Visual Studio installer is going to launch. There we go. And as soon as it has loaded, there we go, we can take a look at the right-hand side. And we need to search for data storage and processing. And in particularly, we need to find out if SQL Server Data Tools is installed. If you can't find it right there, well, just scroll down a bit. There we go. Go to Other Toolsets. Go to Data Storage and Processing. Mark this toolset and install it, and then you're good to go. So, in the meanwhile, Visual Studio should have done all the hard work for me right there. And we have our first database project. So if we take a look, finished importing database, and it has generated a log file as well. To be fair, I've never taken a look at the log file before. As long as it works, it works. So we're just going to say finish, and we want to execute a quick validation. So let's say we want to validate our views in our data warehouse. So there we go. And if we take a look, I have 5 views in my target database. And we have 5 in the database project as well. So it seems to be quite okay. Now, this is one way to set up your database project, which is, of course, the most easy way. And therefore, I'm going to show you how to set it up in an alternative way for a specific use case. For that one, we are going to use our AdventureWorks LT project right here. And if we take a look at the right-hand side, there we go. I'm going to, yeah. So the AdventureWorks LT database right here. And then we're going to use this view. The reason why, well, I will just tell you a very short story. A couple of years ago, I was working in a company where the ERP system was owned by a third-party vendor. And we had an agreement as a development team with the third-party vendor that we were allowed to create certain objects in their database, but we were not allowed to change any existing objects for the ERP system. So this actually is the use case that we're going to work with. So let's say the view product category is the view that we're allowed to maintain. Of course, since I'm getting started with database projects, I want to have this view in a database project as well. So let's find out how we can do this. So first of all, I can't be importing the full database. So we're just going to the right-hand side. And we're first going to create our folder structure. In my case, I'm just going to go to add folder. There we go. I will call it my views folder. Then the only thing I need to do, or as a first step, of course, I'm just going to drag and drop my view product category from the SQL Server Object Explorer to my database project. There we go. And now we just need to wait for a moment. And there we go. The view has been imported into my database project. If we now take a more closer look, well, as you can see, we are getting some issues, especially at the bottom. We currently have 19 issues that we need to overcome, or we won't be able to deploy our changes in the end. So if we take a look at what kind of errors we're getting, there we go. So what can we see? Well, unresolved reference to schema, unresolved reference to object, unresolved reference to, well, I think you get the point. Because we're not importing all dependent objects into our database process, we are getting these kinds of errors. So we need to find a way to overcome these errors to be able to build and deploy successfully. To get this done, we're going to execute a couple of steps. First of all, we're going to navigate to the right-hand side, right there, and we're going to right-click on our view product category.sql file. We're going to properties, and then we're going to take a look at the build action right here, this one. So what is the build action? This is defined for every single file you're going to add to your database project, and by default, it will be assigned the build action. This actually tells the system, well, for every single build and deploy you want to execute, make sure that this file is included in the default build and deployment process. Since we have these kind of issues, we can't be including this file in the default build and deployment process. So to overcome that issue, we're going to assign build action none right here, this one. And if we do right there none, we're going to see that, well, all our issues disappeared. Of course, we still want to be able to deploy our changes that we're making to this view. So now we will need to find a way around. So what are we going to do? Well, if I go back to my Solution Explorer on the right-hand side, I'm going to right-click on my project, go to Add as a new item. And I'm going to introduce you to a new kind of file, which is called a post-deployment script. So post-deployment script, I'm just giving it a default name for now. There we go. And now we can take a look what it will do first. Well, first of all, a post-deployment script will contain SQL statements that will be appended to the build script. Please keep the appended word in mind. This is the keyword for this file type. Then it's just explaining, well, you can use, where is my pointer there? Okay, you can use this kind of syntax to include any SQL file. So let's try. So I'm going to say r double point, use, and then view product category.sql. And there we go. We're done. Well, almost. I asked to keep the appended word in mind. What the post-deployment script is actually doing is, well, it is actually when you're executing a database publish, it's really going to execute the build. Then it's going to execute the deployment, and it's going to generate a deployment script. And for every single file we're mentioning right here, it's just going to take the code from that file and paste it at the bottom of the deployment script. So if we take a look at our view product category, we can see right there, right here, sorry, there we go. It will always try to create the view. So the first time, if we're creating a new one, it will work just fine. But as soon as we try to deploy it once more, it will start to fail. So we will need to be assisting the build and deployment process a bit. To do so, well, we can do a couple of different things. We can say create or alter view, that's one. Or what you can do as well is say, well, drop view if exists, like this, but then it is important to add a go in between as well. Otherwise, it won't work. And now we're good to go, actually. So now we can be proud. We have created our first version of our database project solution. And now it is time to connect it to Azure DevOps. To do so, well, we're just going to connect to Azure DevOps. So I've opened up Azure DevOps. I've created an organization with my name for today. And I've created the project Cloud Data Driven. And if I open the project, I can go to repos at the left-hand side. And then I'm just going to create a new repository. For today, I will call it Cloud Data Driven. And I won't be including a README file for now. You can, but for today, I'm just going to leave it. I'm just going to hit create. There we go. Now we have created our first Azure DevOps repository. The thing I'm going to do right now is I'm just going to copy the URL and I'm going back to Visual Studio. And if we take a look at the right bottom corner, right there, Visual Studio was already pointing out, well, it might be a good idea to add your database project to source control. So let's follow the advice. So add to source control git. Okay, so what did I do right here? Well, I went to existing remote. Then Visual Studio has identified, well, I probably need to initialize the local Git repository at this location, which is pointing to the folder where my solution file is saved. And then I just pasted the URL to Azure DevOps in the remote URL right here. This is, of course, how you can do it in Visual Studio 2019. In Visual Studio 2022, you will have an option right below here, just to authenticate against Azure DevOps, which is really useful. What is important, by the way, which is something I did forget to mention, and I'm quickly going to say create and push. Yes, I want to save. At this point in time, it's first going to initialize the local Git repository. It's going to create the connection to the remote repository, and then it's going to push all our changes to the remote as well. If we take a look at the right bottom corner, we can see we're currently connected to our Cloud Data Driven repository on our local machine, and we're currently looking at the master branch right here. So we are going to take a look at this one in Azure DevOps in a moment, but I just thought I was forgetting something, and which is the reason why I'm not showing you how to drag and drop. What we did was we dragged and dropped the view product category from the SQL Server Object Explorer to our database project. This works fine in Visual Studio 2019. In Visual Studio 2022, it doesn't. It's something I've contacted Microsoft to point this one out. I know they're looking at it, so that's the reason why I'm still using Visual Studio 2019, by the way. Cool. That being said, if I now go back to Azure DevOps, I'm just going to hit refresh. I can see that everything has been synchronized just now. So this is the point where all our colleagues can start to benefit from the work that we have been doing. Now, it's time to execute some development as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new branch. I'm going to create my development branch. There we go, based on master, that's just fine. And now I'm heading back to Visual Studio. There we go. And if I go back to the right bottom corner, there we go. I'm just going to click the master branch, and I'm going to create my feature branch right now. So new branch. Then branch name, well, what I typically do is I name it feature/ticket number. In my case, data warehouse ticket 1. For example, if it would be a hotfix or a bugfix branch, I would say, well, hotfix or whatever you call it, bugfix, for example. The reason why I'm using this kind of prefix of bugfix/ or hotfix/ or feature/ is just because if you take a look at a lot of branches in your Azure DevOps repos environment, you will be able to fold all feature branches together, all bug fixes branches, and so on. So for today, I'm going to use feature/data warehouse ticket 1, and then I want to take a look at based on master. Be aware, this is based on my local master branch, which of course is not okay actually. I actually want to take a look at my remote master to make sure I really have the latest version of the master branch. And then I'm just going to hit create. There we go. Zoom out, yep. And now in the right bottom corner, I can see I'm connected to my local feature data warehouse 1 branch. And now it is time to execute some development. So what am I going to do? And you can already see, I will be very creative today. And I'm going to add product category description 5. And there we go. Development is done. Now, if we take a look at the right bottom corner once more, there we go. We can see Git or Visual Studio has identified one change. So this is our automatic change tracking, which is coming in, of course. If we just click on the one, the Git changes pane on the right-hand side is opening up. Go. So we can see, well, a change has been made to view product category. So we're going to stage this change, and then we are going to provide a meaningful commit message. Please make it meaningful. I will show you later on why. So what I typically do is I say, well, I'm working for this ticket number, and then I'm explaining why I made the change. If you're just getting started, something I picked up a couple of weeks ago, just start with because. And then the reason why you did something. In my case, I will just say, well, I added a column for demo purposes to show how easy it can be to work with database projects. There we go. And Azure DevOps. And that's the reason why I executed the development. And I'm just going to say commit stage and push. What it's doing in the background right now is it's first going to commit my change to my local Git repository, and then it's going to push this change to the remote. So it has successfully been pushed to the origin. If we now take a look at, oh, that's really big, there we go, at Azure DevOps, I'm just going to hit refresh. I was expecting a change. Well, just know I'm currently taking a look at the development branch. Of course, I made the change in my feature branch. To be honest, I really lost time with this one a couple of times. I was really looking at the wrong branches. So make sure you avoid this one. As you can see, it has been updated just now. If I want to, I can take a look at what has been changed right here. I'm going to compare. And then I can see, I'm just going to, yeah, there we go. I can see, well, product category description 5 has been added. Cool. That's that. Now it is time to merge our change from our feature branch to our development branch to be able to deploy it afterwards. So I'm going back to Visual Studio and I'm navigating to the right bottom corner once more. And to be fair, that right bottom corner is my favorite one. It's where I'm doing all the work when working with Git or when I need to change a couple of things. So, well, now we want to execute our merge to development environment. So I didn't get the development branch locally yet. So I'm going to remotes and I actually was expecting my development branch right here. Well, there's one thing I didn't mention yet about Git commands. and we're currently missing a git command, which is called the fetch command. This command will allow you to get branch-based changes in. What I mean with that is, well, if somebody else creates a branch locally and is pushing changes on that branch to the remote to make sure that you are able to exit the branch, well, then you will need to execute the fetch command to make sure that your local repository knows that a new branch was added or removed at the remote repository. So if we execute the fetch command, there we go, and we give it a couple of moments, and we go back to feature data warehouse 1, go to remote. That is strange. What is fetch? Yeah. Initializing fetch. Okay. Okay, there it is. Luckily. So right now we can see our origin development branch. What we're going to do right now, well, we're just going to say remote origin development, and we just click on the branch. By doing this, it will check out the development branch and create it as a local branch. And now we can execute our merge as well. To do so, well, we're just going to right-click on our feature branch, and this might be a bit more clear. Right-click on our feature branch and say merge into current branch. There we go. And right now, Visual Studio is giving us a warning. Well, are you sure you want to merge? For today, I am, and just pay attention right here. Oh, if we say yes, there we go. Our development appeared in our development branch as well right now. As you can see in the right bottom corner again, it has identified one outgoing change as well, which actually is, well, just the reference to, well, we merged the feature branch to the development branch. So we need to push this change to the remote as well. So push. That's the get push command that has been executed in the back. There we go. And now it has been pushed to the remote. Okay. So that's that. Now it is time to deploy our change to the development environment. To do so, well, we're going to the Solution Explorer, going to right-click on our database project, and we say Publish. By clicking the Publish action, the first thing that Visual Studio is doing is, well, it is executing the build process. The build processing actually is going to verify a couple of things, and in the end, if the build process is successful, it will generate 3 kinds of files: the model file, a DLL file, and a DACPAC file. The most important one is the DACPAC file right here, this one. If you ever want to find out what is included in a DACPAC file, you can just rename the .dacpac extension to .zip, extract all, and take a look what's inside. Might be interesting to execute once, for example. Now that's that. So my build was successful and the published database window opened. I now just need to connect to my target database. There we go, to my local host and AdventureWorks LT, of course, for today. Okay. And then I'm going to take a look at the advanced section. So what can we do right here? Well, right here, we can say, well, or it's asking actually, do you want to deploy your database properties? Of course, in my case, since I'm deploying to a third-party vendor database, I don't want to. So I'm just going to unmark this one. Then this one has been a lifesaver for me a couple of times. Block incremental deployment if data loss might occur. What this is doing is, as soon as the publishing process is identifying that there might be any kind of data loss, this will come into action and will just quit the deployment to make sure that nothing gets lost. I always leave this one marked for a reason, actually. Just know if you ever, for some reason, need to remove a column, you will need to unmark this one, otherwise it won't work. Then, something else, I'm going to the drop section of the advanced publish settings, and I want to point out these 4 below. and especially the last one. That was what I was mentioning earlier during the presentation as well. If you choose to exclude your indexes from your database projects, you will need to unmark this one. Otherwise, you will have a fun day at work because you're going to create all your indexes on your target database over again. If you don't unmark this one, it's going to drop all indexes which are not included in your database project. So just know, I've been in this situation a couple of times in the past. So just know this one really is important. And I actually suggest that you just unmark all 4. There we go. And now we just confirm our settings. And this also is the time where we can create a publishing profile. You just click Save Profile As, give it a proper name. In my case, well, AdventureWorks LT_dev. There we go. And before I'm going to publish, I'm going to show you what's included in a publishing profile. So it is an XML file, as I mentioned before. And well, what is it showing? Well, the target database name, if it needs to block on possible data loss. And then, for example, as well, what we mentioned is, do you want me to drop the indexes which are not available in your source? So what is the major benefit of a publishing profile? Well, if I'm just double clicking my publishing profile, the build process is executed, the published database window is launched with all my values pre-configured and preloaded into the published database window. And now I can just hit publish. And this is the point where we can start to play the waiting game. So 6, 7, this might take a while. Now, it won't take half an hour or an hour, but it can take a couple of moments. Okay, there we go. So what did it do during the deployment phase? Well, it created the publishing preview. It has created the database script. It has executed the script on my target server. And everything was completed successfully in no more than 18 seconds. And it might be that you're thinking right now, well, it's only because we have only made a very minor change. Well, I can tell you I'm working with a lot of database projects at work, and for a lot larger databases as well. And there I'm still able to deploy in a matter of minutes. So it really is, it is very useful. For me, this really was a game changer. In the past, for preparing and deploying, I was losing hours, maybe days. And right now I was able to prepare and deploy in a matter of minutes. We merged the change to our development environment. We deployed it, all that in a matter of minutes instead of hours or days. So this is really the thing I like about database projects. A couple of more things that I want to show you. First of all, if we navigate back to the file that we have changed, in this case, our view per category, I can right click on the file, go to Git, there we go, and say view history. What this is doing, this is showing me the exact change log of the file. So I can tell you who has changed the file, when the file was changed, why the file was changed. And this is one of the reasons why you want to have a meaningful commit message. Now I really know why somebody changed this file. And if I want to, I can see what has been changed by just selecting my commit and the previous commit, right click and say compare. Right here, I can identify, well, the per category description 5 has been added. Then, oh, there we go. This is really useful. I'm using this one all the time. I'm doing a lot of validation work at work, and this really helps me to say, well, that person made a change. Why was a change made? If there is an issue with a certain database load, I can try to take a look at every single step of the code and find out who made the change, and I'm able to go to the person and talk about the change that was made. So this is really useful. One more thing that we didn't mention yet, if I go back to Azure DevOps, let's say our development is done, we have validated our development. Now it is time to get our change into the production environment. execute or merge to our main branch, I'm going to show you an alternative way, which is by making use of a pull request right here. Pull request. I'm just going to say create new pull request. Then I need to specify which branch I want to merge from, which in my case is data warehouse ticket 1 into master. And then I'm just going to say, well, this person needs to revise this change. There we go. Yeah. And then I'm just going to say create. What this is doing, well, it's already identifying if there might be any merge conflict right here. And, well, it is going to tell me, well, if I go to files, I can see, well, okay, this has been added as well. Now, as a reviewer, since somebody else needs to revise your code, so you're actually introducing peer reviewing, this will improve your development quality as well. Somebody needs to revise your change before it can move to a certain environment. That really has a major benefit. Now, as the reviser, I'm just going to say, well, seems to be okay. I'm going to approve the change, and then I'm going to complete the change. And right here is something important to mention as well, which is this feature right here. Delete feature data warehouse 1 after merging. By using pull requests, you are avoiding to handle a lot of branch maintenance. Using pull requests will handle the branch maintenance for you. So if I just say, well, complete merge, let me go back to overview. You can see it's currently merging the pull request, and there we go. The pull request has been completed. It has executed the merge to the master branch. If I now go to my branches, I can see if I go to all that I don't have any feature branches left. So the branch maintenance is done for us. Cool. That is everything I wanted to show you during the demo. So let's head back to the presentation. Right here. There we go. So, no. There it is. So moving forward, today I have been showing you how to set up a database project in 2 different ways, with a full database and for a specific use case, if you only want to include a subsection of a database. Then I have been showing you as well how to create an Azure DevOps repository and how you can link your database project to your remote Azure DevOps repository. And we have been talking about branching as well, and we walked through a step-by-step example during the demo. Then I've also introduced you very briefly, of course, to pull requests as well. Then the logical next steps doesn't really matter which order you would take, but you can, for example, start to think about test automation. So if you want to, you can, for example, take a look at T-SQL-T, which is a T-SQL unit testing framework, which might be useful. And then deployment automation. For deployment automation, it might be useful to take a look at Azure DevOps pipelines, for example. Then the reason why I'm pointing to deployment automation as well is, well, until a couple of months ago, I was working for a company where I had to maintain 6 different environments, 3 development environments and 3 production environments. Since the deployment process doesn't take that much time anymore, which in the case we just had, it was a couple of minutes. Even when if I need to deploy to 6 different environments, it would take me 6 times, let's say 10 minutes. So I'm still losing an hour to deploy to all environments. So to avoid that, it might be interesting to automate your deployments to, for example, your development environment. What I do, for example, is I just set up an Azure DevOps pipeline where if a commit or a merge was done to the development branch, it automatically builds my database project and deploys it to all my development environments. And for production, I have a pipeline which is building my solution to get my production code ready. And then just with the click on a button, I can deploy it to multiple environments as well. So that might be interesting to take a look at as well. Then benefits and challenges. I really hope I was able to show you the benefits about working with database projects and Azure DevOps. From my point of view, one of the biggest ones is, well, first of all, it can be really easy to get started and to set up a database project. On top of that, you will have a clear change log. That's something where I was struggling with in the past as well. I wasn't able to document myself since I was forgetting things all the time. So this really helped me. Then the efficiency of deploying. I really gained a lot of time since I started to work with database projects and Azure DevOps, of course. And then, since a couple of years, I started to use pull requests as well. And from my experience, it really improves development quality, since everybody needs to be, everybody's development or everybody's code needs to be revised by somebody else. But just make sure that you don't introduce too many bugs into your production environment, for example. Then the biggest challenge will definitely be, and something I mentioned before, changing habits. So you will need to change the way you work. Otherwise, working with database projects and Azure DevOps won't be that successful. So people will be your biggest challenge. That being said, thank you very much for attending today. It was a pleasure for being here. In case you have any feedback about the session, I have my own feedback form at the URL right here, oliviervs.b/feedback. If you want to have the slides, they're available on GitHub. Even more important, if you want to go every single step at your own pace, I've written out a full blog post series about getting started with database projects and Azure DevOps. Everything is, you can find everything at my personal blog, oliviervs.be. In case you have any questions later than right now, just reach out. I'm more than eager to assist where possible. You can contact me via email, via LinkedIn, via Twitter. It really doesn't matter. If I can help you get started, just let me know. And then, of course, thanks for your attention. If there are questions, I would be more than happy to answer them.
Great presentation, Olivier. First of all, I learned so much from it. Yeah, and it's I have Jody mentioned something, and just to show you how valuable your session is. Jody mentioned great overview. I use this daily, but you showed me several things I didn't know, and will definitely use going forward. And then, but it seems like I have one question for you. The first one is, what about security? And there is another one when you just get started, probably 15 minutes. Someone mentioned something about hotfix when you were showing the master, the feature branches. Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if you have time to elaborate a bit.
Actually, what I can't find the question about the hotfix branches, but I saw it passing by as well. So what you're actually doing, and I'm just going to go back to the slide right here. Since I'm using branching per feature, it actually doesn't matter if I'm using a featured branch, it actually doesn't matter if I name it featured branch, bugfix branch, or hotfix branch. The most important thing, if you need to create a hotfix on your production environment, what you're going to do is you're just going to, well, create a new branch based on your main branch or master branch, execute your bug fix in there, merge it to your main branch. If you have time to validate it there, that would be amazing. If you don't, well, you can just merge your main branch and your feature branch into your main branch and deploy your changes. I hope that answers the question. Then I see a question about security logins. Can you please specify the question? Are you talking about the database logins? Are you talking about security of Azure DevOps? The question isn't completely clear for me. Okay, both. Both, yeah. That's a great question. To be fair, concerning security or logins, I actually don't include them in my database projects personally. I always, since most of the time security is something that is, especially in the companies where I worked for, security is handled by the IT department, and they just maintain the security to the development environment, to the production environment by using security groups. And then logins to Azure DevOps, of course. Yeah, these are, you can just invite people with their company email, so with the one that is registered in your Azure Active Directory, if I'm right. You can just send them a request to join your Azure DevOps organization. I hope that answers the question. Then there is a question as well about what would be the upgrade path from TFS 2010 to Azure DevOps. That's a good question. To be fair, I didn't work with TFS before, so I won't be able to answer it completely correctly, I guess. To be fair, if it's just database projects, you can easily copy them from your, I guess you can just copy them from your TFS repositories and then just create a new repository in Azure DevOps, but something I would need to find out actually. So, okay. Any other questions? Not really. Okay. Okay. If there are no more questions, then I would say thank you very much for your time. Thanks for having me, and hopefully we meet each other somewhere in the future. If you run into me at some event, which might be the case, just say hi, have a chat. I'm more than willing to talk data. So.